All right, there is a little bit of material we need to get covered that is going to be on the test, and then we will talk about the test and a little bit of how you should study and prepare for it. And depending upon how much time is left, we'll probably look at a little bit more material that won't be on the test. So we'll see. All right, we were in the middle of talking about the explorers. Let me turn to the right page. Talked about Europe being prepared for this time of exploration. You know, the 6 things there that set the stage. And then Spain and some of their explorers, and Portugal and some of their explorers, and then the line of demarcation. And how the Catholic Pope there was splitting the world up between the 2 Catholic nations. England didn't listen very well to this, but splitting the world up between the 2. So, anybody know anything at all about the history of Portugal and Spain just prior to this time frame?
They just finished the Reconquista?
Yes, they had just driven the Muslims out. All right, so you can kind of think of their drive to explore as that same energy they used to drive the Muslims out then turned and being used for exploration, because it just happens right on the hills of it. So the Muslims are in control of parts of Spain for hundreds and hundreds of years, and it's just prior to this that they drive them out. So. All right, next thing to talk about is the Spanish Armada. Once we talk about that, we will talk about some of the French and some of the English explorers. Spanish Armada. All right, this takes place in, well, I shouldn't tell you. Somebody tell me. It's on your timeline. 1588 is when we see the Spanish Armada taking place. The first point to mention is that by 1580, we have the King of Spain also being the King of Portugal. We have the thrones united in one person. The guy's name is Philip II. If you really want to confuse yourself, figure out the history of the Portuguese and Spanish thrones during this era, because they have the same guy as Philip II and Philip I, depending on where you look at, which country you're in. But anyway, Philip II of Spain here is the head of both Spain and Portugal. And if just look at the area that's under his control. I mean, this is a massive amount of territory. Treasure ships full of gold coming into Spain from the New World. A massive amount of territory, all under his control. Excuse me. They did not use that money very well. If you think of, you might have heard of a football player or some baseball player, basketball player that 10 or 15 years after they're done playing, they're broke. All right, and you think, how could they do that? Well, they just wasted their money, right? And Spain, kind of in a collective sense, they did that type of stuff with it. They didn't use the money very well. They needed a constant inflow of money to keep themselves alive and going. That's part of what made them so mad at England when they began to attack these treasure ships and sell them off to England instead of to the New World, or to Spain. So a massive amount of territory under the control of Spain. And Philip II here decides that he wants to conquer England. Right? The official reason that made it sound good was they weren't Catholic, and he wanted to restore them into the loving arms of the Catholic Church by killing the ones who resisted. That was the official reason. Really, at the heart of it, England had begun to capture their ships, and the just lost the name. The British privateers, private ships who were given permission from the government to go out and attack the Spanish. We don't do that today anymore. They began to be successful. There were some famous ones. Francis Drake was one I was trying to think of, and there's some others who are very famous at attacking these. So we have this official reason, this religious reason to make it sound good, but at the heart of it, he wanted to go after England for these privateers and them starting to prey on the Spanish shipping. So, all right, a little bit of a rabbit trail here quickly. Does anybody know what's happening in Portugal at this point? Why in the world do we see them weaken to the point that they merge with Spain, basically, at this point? Somebody might know. Okay. Portugal had just gone through the Portuguese Inquisition, where they drove out anybody who disagreed with the Catholic Church, and that happened to be a lot of the people in Portugal who had any skills or talents. So a lot of the merchant class, a lot of the tradesmen, a lot of the Jews all get driven out of Portugal, and it really left them in a very weak position. So weak that they end up, the king of Spain ends up just becoming their king, and they merge. Obviously, don't merge permanently, but they merge the two. But that Spanish Inquisition, it had a very integral part in it. So, all right, so we have the king of Spain here having control of all this area, and then he launches this attack against England. That attack comes in 1588. He gathers 180 ships in Spain, roughly 30,000 men to handle those ships. That was not the army. That was not the landing force. That was the sailors.
How many ships was that?
180. A vast armada, a Spanish armada. And his plan was to leave Spain and go up here to the Netherlands and pick up a Spanish army that was there and bring that across to England. The Netherlands had been in religious wars for a long time. A very strong Protestant element there, and also a very strong Catholic element. And Spain had provided troops for the Catholic side. So he had this military army there in the Netherlands, and he was going to go pick them up and then sail over to England and drop them off there. England, the battle takes place on the way, so they never actually get there to pick these troops up. On the way, England confronts this vast armada there in the narrow channel between England and Europe, and they beat it. All right, this was an amazing thing. I mean, I don't know. It'd be like the is it the Nationals beating the Harlem Globetrotters or something? You know, it's not supposed to happen. Right? If you just stack up the two forces and look at them, England should not have won this thing. All right, they really didn't have a navy to speak of. Queen Elizabeth here really said to all the private merchants, you better put some guns on your ships, know how to use them, and go out and do your best. So we have this mad fury across England of these merchant ships outfitting themselves to fight, and then going out and fighting against these gigantic Spanish galleons with dozens and dozens of cannons on each side. All right, and there's this vast volleys of fire that they could put out. But anyway, they catch them there in that little narrow channel. And the English ships that are smaller are able to outmaneuver these bigger kind of lumbering ships that couldn't turn very quickly. And they defeat them. All right, it really is, it'd be hard to understate the significance of this event. Okay, think of how different the world would be. We talked about North or South America, North and South Colombia, if the name had gone differently. Think about how different the world would be if Spain dominated all of America. North and South America. Even Caleb wouldn't be speaking French. So. It would have had a massive effect on world history. So it really is, it's hard to understate the significance of this thing. Everything from the religious liberties and freedoms that are developing in England at this point to the colonies in America and the effect that America's had on the world, it would be very hard to understate this. There's a little bit of a fun story for not a Spanish sailor about this. So, just prior to the battle, England had sent some fire ships through the Spanish Navy. Anybody know what a fire ship is? It didn't put out fires.
So a ship that they purposely set on fire?
Yeah, they just take some old boat and they would load it up with all kinds of flammable stuff and get upwind of the Spanish ships, light it on fire, and just let her go. And the Spanish ships were very scared of this. Obviously, any ship would be. And they did not have time to pull their anchors up. Please don't think about an anchor that you might throw out on our boat, on our lake. I mean, these are heavy chains. They had big, like pulley type systems inside, multiple men on the arms cranking these things up. It took time. They ended up having to cut them rather than pull them up to get away from these fire ships in time. Then we go to the battle. They get blasted figuratively and literally in the battle. And then the survivors are just after the battle, there's this big major storm. And these old sailing ships in storms would drop their anchors and just ride the thing out because the winds would smash them against the rocks or wherever, but they didn't have them. Okay, so we get these British ships getting smashed along the coast of Ireland and northern parts of England, and I forget one of the accounts of the time talked about the knaves of England finishing them off with their knives. Okay, the guys who didn't die in the shipwrecks that crawled on shore and then they got stabbed in the back. This armada is gone. I mean, it's not that just they lose this battle. Basically, nothing comes back to Spain. It is gone here. So, an amazing victory here for England. Significant enough that it's on the timeline. It's one of those turning points where things go very, very differently. And I think a very, very good picture here of God's providence, God preserving the religious freedom that's blossoming in England and the Reformation that is much stronger there than other places. So, okay, Spanish Armada. Questions there? You guys are just full of life and zest today. Joanna, right? And Jasmine. I got it right today. If I ever see you outside of class, I won't know your name. But as long as you're in that seat, I've got it. It's not so much you that has a name, it's that seat that has a name. So, yes.
Is this before or after Francis Drake and the sacking of Cadiz?
I think before. He does go on and plunder several cities along South America. I think before, but I could be wrong on that. Okay, Spanish Armada. That marks the high point of Spanish power. From this point on, they begin to weaken and decline. They're not gone, obviously, but they begin to wane in significance. And England here is on the rise. England becomes the dominant world power here very, very quickly. Spain drops off the scene. So, all right. Next, we want to talk about some French explorers and some of the English explorers, and a little bit more about England since it's American history. All right, French explorers, a couple here. Don't correct my pronunciations here. Jacques Cartier, is that close? Good enough for an American. What's that?
How do you spell that last name?
Cartier.
I feel like Jacques.
Jacques. Tier. All right, he was looking for a route to the Far East through North America. If you're familiar with the geography of North America, it does not exist. But he didn't know that. Okay, so he's trying to sail through here, trying to find a way through. He does discover the Hudson River, but doesn't find that route through. Again, there's still here the actual picture of the world and the geography and what's actually there is there's a lot of confusion. He was trying to figure out a way to get over to China and India. So, all right, that was 1534 to 35 if you want some dates for that. All right, next guy, Samuel de Champlain. Destroyed it? Okay. Kayla's being gracious. Champlain. Samuel. I'm sure that's not the right way to spell it or say it. 1608, he establishes the first permanent French settlement in the New World. Samuel de Champlain. He's the father of New France. I'm the father of Emily and Anne and Olivia. He's the father of New France. Okay, Champlain. Next guy, La Salle. Robert Cavalier de La Salle. Is that bad? La Salle, Lasalle. He explored the Mississippi River. Maybe that's
What was his first name?
Robert. Explored the Mississippi River and claims it for France. That claim does not hold. It's kind of a neat idea to just travel through someplace and claim it. Okay, this is all belongs to my country. So it was just a claim on paper until you actually had people there to claim it. But anyway, claims it all for France. So traveled through, not far from where we are, through Lake Michigan, through basically Gary over to the Mississippi and down that direction. So. All right, one other thing to comment about the French colonies is that these grew and developed slowly. All right, we mentioned the Spanish colonies, those growing and developing slowly. These grow and develop slowly as well. And there's two main reasons here. The first one is, their strict application of mercantilism, or their strict application of government control of the economy. We mentioned mercantilism in passing before, but there was very little economic freedom. There were rules and restrictions, and even fur traders. There were certain places they couldn't go. This was one guy's territory. This is another guy's territory. They had lots and lots of restrictions and controls, government control. So there wasn't. So that was one. And then the other, I just have it labeled. This might not be the good place. A lack of quick riches in in Central and South America. They had the natives dig up gold for them and haul it off to the boats, and they'd take it back to America. There wasn't that access to gold and things like that so easily up north. Okay, so they grow and develop slowly. All right, now England. A few of the explorers and colonizers from England. All right, the first point is a tough one to say. England was on the rise under Queen Elizabeth. They were a burgeoning power. She was the queen at the Spanish Armada. She actually ruled for a very long time, 1558 to 1603. So they're right in the middle, 1588. She defeats the Spanish Armada. So England was on the rise. We see in England a very stable government. We see them defeating the Spanish. We see increased religious as well as political freedoms. England here becoming a major world power as we enter into this time frame. The 1600s in England is a very, very exciting time as far as history is concerned. 1558 to 1603. All right, so England on the rise here. We'll look at a couple of explorers from England. All right, the first one actually predates her, but just to have the explorers together. A guy named John Cabot. Yeah, C-A-B-O-T. He sails actually very early on, 1497 and 1498. And he explores the northern coast of North America from Virginia up through Canada. He calls it a newfound land. Newfoundland. Okay, so John Cabot from England. Then there's a gap of time. The next Englishman we'll mention is Sir Francis Drake. He's one of those privateers. He's referred to as the Sea Dog, but Sir Francis Drake. He left around 1577, so Matthew, this would then predate the Spanish Armada, I believe, for your question. He leaves England, sails all the way around South America, makes it to California, names California New England. Yeah, I don't know. That name didn't stick. Another part of our country is New England. So, and then he goes on to sail around the world. That voyage, he takes off in 1577 for that around the world voyage. All right, then one other guy here in this time frame. We're going to talk about the English colonies later, so we'll see more of these. But one guy here early on, Sir Walter Raleigh, R-A-L-E-I-G-H. And he twice here attempts to start a colony in the New World, down north, South Carolina, that part of the world. tries to start two of them. One of them is in 1588, a place called Roanoke Island, and then he comes back in 1587, gets the colony started, leaves some people there, goes back to England to get supplies and possibly more settlers, and comes back to the Spanish Armada. So he's delayed in England, having to help deal with the Spanish Armada, and by the time he gets back, the colony is gone.
What was the second one?
1587.
What was his name?
Sir Walter Raleigh. Oh, there wasn't, I don't know.
Guy who made tobacco.
What's that?
Guy who made tobacco, or found tobacco.
Well, that area. I don't know if he was involved in tobacco too much, but he would have, yeah. So that colony that disappeared, there's still speculation about what happened, if they got wiped out by plague, or the Indians killed them, or they ran out of food and tried to travel overland someplace. They're, as far as I know, we still really don't know exactly what happened to them. It was just gone when he came back. So, all right, we will, after the test, look at Jamestown, obviously a colony that doesn't disappear, and some other English colonies. But we'll save that for after the test. Yeah, I didn't put it on the test. So. All right, the last thing to talk about that's actually on the test is some reasons for English colonization. Reasons for English colonization. What's going on in England that causes this a flood of people over to the New World? Really, it's amazing growth of some of these colonies. So there are several things going on in England that push us this direction. All right, the first thing is religious freedom, or maybe a lack of religious freedom in England and a desire for religious freedom in the New World. So we mentioned before when we talk about Henry VIII breaking from the Catholic Church and the Toleration Act that we end up with four main factions there. And depending on the time frame, one or the other is getting persecuted. So we have Maryland started for the Catholics, we have Protestants coming over, we have separatists coming over. So at different time frames, different groups are fleeing England to establish religious freedom in America, or to get to a place where they can worship where they can worship like they want and make other people not worship the way they want. There was the Catholics wanting to worship as Catholics in Maryland, and the separatists, the Protestants wanting to worship like Protestants up in New England and not allow the separatists to worship like they want. So they came over wanting freedom for their religion. That idea does change in time. Once we get to the Constitution, we see that disestablishment of any type of state religion. But at this point, freedom for them to worship as they felt. So we have religious freedom. That is a major facet of bringing people over. Okay, another one is for profit. Businessmen wanting to make money. And this was a chance. It was an investment. Oh, imagine, I don't know, just moving to live in Africa with the riches and the expense. You got the flight there. You got to somehow get all your stuff there. This is a significant expense, and you might be thinking, I don't know if I can do that right now. Okay. Now imagine the extra complexity of there not being anything established, and you have to take over all the equipment and tools and supplies to build a house and survive. So this was not a small undertaking. It was extremely expensive, and a lot of the settlers were financed by some company hoping to make a profit. They would approach a group of men and say, "Hey, why don't you buy us a ship, and we'll go to the New World, and then we could somehow share the money." Right? So there was that desire. Now a lot of people didn't make money, all right, but they were, some of the men financing this. They were hoping to make a profit. So, and that's not evil or wrong to make a profit, despite what has become popular from Hillary Clinton and others. It's not evil or wrong. So, all right, a third thing going on here that causes so much colonization out of England is that in America, the common settler could own land. You could own your own land. England's a little small place, and land was pretty scarce there. So you could come over, and it was yours. You weren't renting it from some nobleman. You weren't there at his pleasure. It was your land. That was a significant draw. Okay. Fourth reason was employment. There was, again, we've got a lot of time we're talking about, but there was at different points here waves of unemployment in England. One of the major factors was something called the enclosure movement. Anybody have any idea what the enclosure movement was? Miles is honest. He just says, absolutely not. I'm clueless. All right. The enclosure movement was a farming phenomenon. What happened was, or maybe prior to this, farmers would parcel out their land and give money to farmers who didn't own land and let them farm a small piece of it. And that farmer would grow whatever he wanted and give some of the crop to the landowner, and he'd keep the rest. There began to be a movement in England where farmers, instead of leasing out the little pieces like that, they would put a fence around the whole thing and, raise sheep or something else. And all of these farmers then were losing their positions and didn't have a farm to live on. So as farmers began to, it's called the enclosure movement. That was the pattern of them fencing in their farmland and growing animals, or them directly doing all the farming. There's less need for all of these small farmers. So these guys are then coming to the New World, and they could have their own land. It wasn't land that the farmer was letting them use, the owner. It was their own land. So employment, that was a factor at times. Okay, and then the last one here was political freedom. People coming to the New World to get away from oppression of the government in England. A lot of the oppression had a religious flavor and connotation to it, but there was political freedom. England is, in this time frame, developing very quickly a lot of political and religious freedom. But in that development, people are, it was sometimes a messy process. And there are people coming over to America where they didn't have to go through the process. They could establish a colony with those freedoms from the get-go. Okay. Questions?